Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film discussion is going to be about The Incredibles. It's rated PG with a runtime of 1 hour and 55 minutes, and it was released in the year of 2004. This is a Pixar animation film, and it's under the category of animation, action, adventure, family, and it's probably, I'd say, one of the best superhero films ever made. And I know that a lot of people have their own biases and opinions about superhero films, and I think that some people might not count this as one because it is family oriented and it is animation, and a lot of people like to put animation in its own sort of category, and sometimes they'll diminish it and think that it's only for kids, which isn't the case. And it isn't as if that's an issue, even if something is made solely for kids, but I do think that sometimes animation doesn't get as much love as it deserves because it's animation and people like to put it in very specific categories. Yeah, I'm doing this film because it's something that I grew up watching over and over and over again. It's basically a classic to me, and I think it's a film that will be considered a classic for years to come. It's just as good as I remember it being, and I decided to do a quick little commentary about it today. Okay, so basically, with this watch of the film, I've seen it so many times I can't really narrow it down to a number, but with my recent watch, I kind of realized why I think this film is so well received. And to be honest, I think it's so good because it doesn't solely depend on the genre of superhero or supers or action. And I think the fun and the appeal with action films and superhero films is that they're not always very serious, and it is a good way to be entertained without having the heaviness of life and the burdens that come with life settling in the film. And it's a really good way to experience escapism. But this film does what I don't think a lot of action films or superhero films do, and that is that it doesn't depend on the powers of the characters to carry the entire movie. And that isn't to say that a lot of superhero films and action films do this, or that if they do that it's necessarily bad, because that's the whole point of it being a genre and that's what makes it different. But when I watched this film, I realized how much of it didn't even show that much of them using their powers. Now, I think the reason why that is because in the plot of the story, basically they're having to hide their real true identities because it's basically illegal to be a super or to show your powers. So that's obviously why the film doesn't delve into that until a lot later. But it didn't ruin the film. You got little moments of them using their powers, seeing a little bit of their strengths, living in their glory days. Obviously, we saw that a lot more as the climax of the film happened, and we got into, the villain really coming into the story. But I realized as I was watching it that this film is so good, and I haven't really seen them use a lot of their powers. And this is a superhero film. I think that the animation style, especially for 2004, is immaculate and different, and it has its own style. Even the intro, theme song is original, but still has that sort of fan base, sort of cliche aspects of superhero concepts. And the characters all stand alone on their own. The dialogue really accentuates these characters as well. Yeah, the pacing is good. The story is believable. The flashbacks are smooth. So well done that I can't even understand why anyone would not like this film. And again, can I say, wow, I had really good taste as a kid. I grew up on a lot of the movies that I've talked about, and man, I had really good taste. Still do. Okay? Still do. So, basically the film starts with one of the main characters, well, basically the main character, Mr. Incredible, also known as his government name, as I like to say, Bob Parr. And he's, saving the world as one does. And we pretty much are straight into the film with him, like, saving a cat in a tree and stopping this high-speed chase with the tree that he took the cat out of. And it's just one thing after another. And you just see him sort of do what he's meant to do with ease, sort of with ease, because there's some damage that comes with it. There's this bomber that he tries to stop. I think he's like a French bomber, and he ends up in that building because he saved someone who was trying to kill themselves, which will spiral into a lot of the plot later. And we also see him interact with Elastigirl, whose government name or real name is Helen, and they're doing this like cute little flirtatious banter with no context, and you can tell that he likes her, and she seems very obviously beautiful and straight to the point and cool because she's Elastigirl. And then later, after all of this going on, he keeps saying, I still got time, and you don't, as the audience, understand why he's saying that. And finally, after all the sequence that he goes through, saving everyone and going through all these situations one after another, he also runs into this kid who is like a part of his fan club, jumps in his car, trying to be like his sidekick. Obviously, Mr. Incredible can't have a child as a sidekick for two things. It could be a nuisance and it could also be a danger. So he kind of just, shrugs him off, which becomes important in the plot later. And he actually catches up with Mr. Incredible twice in a span of a few minutes. Because he's really smart. He's a smart kid. He has these little flying shoes. Kind of interesting. But again, he gets shrugged off by Mr. Incredible. But ultimately, at the end of this opening sequence, after an opening sequence before that, where it looks like the supers are being interviewed and they're being asked questions about basically what it's like to be a super, he shows up to his wedding, late, might I add, and his best friend, who's also a super, Frozone, his real name is Lucius, kind of meets him at the door. He's like, you're late. And he gets to the altar. They're, going to get married. Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, Bob and Helen. So he's going to be marrying her, which gives more context to their banter in the beginning. And it's all going by really quickly, but it's so good, and it's fun, and it's funny, and I like it. And basically, it ends that sequence of him saying, we're supers, what could go wrong? And then, of course, something goes wrong. I'd call that foreshadowing, basically, but it's more like just giving it away. And so we see in the newspaper that after Mr. Incredible saved that guy who was trying to kill himself, the guy feels like it wasn't Mr. Incredible's place to save him because he didn't want to be saved. You hear his lawyer pretty much saying those same words, and Mr. Incredible's kind of mad because he's like, I saved your life, why are you trying to sue me, blah blah blah. And it's a whole media circus, and a lot of the saving that they're doing is still causing a lot of damage in the cities, and that cost a lot of money to repair. And so they're basically blaming them and saying, if you guys want to be a part of the society, you're going to have to hide who you are basically and stop using your powers, which eventually leads into this law where supers have to hide and pretend that they're regular civilians. So that kind of ruins everything that they had established as some part of their identity. And then we are in the present. And I just want to note, the guy who basically sees Mr. Incredible, on one end, I'm watching it and I'm like, yeah, he was kind of trying to kill himself, and so he clearly like didn't want to be there, but it's not really your place to like say that he should be grateful because you saved him, because clearly the guy is like mentally ill, and there's so much to break down about that. And I kind of feel bad for the guy because he got injured in the process of Mr. Incredible saving him. But then you think, okay, if he had jumped and Mr. Incredible hadn't saved him, he definitely either would have died or been in much worse pain. And I mean, what was Mr. Incredible supposed to do? Just like let him die if he could save him? Which at the bottom of the building where the guy was jumping, like, people saw that he was trying to jump, and the ambulance and probably the cops were down there probably trying to find a way to help him too. So I just feel like it's a bit of a reach that he tried to sue him. But I digress. And the only reason why I'm kind of settling on that specific situation is because not only does this lead to them basically having to hide their identities in this specific situation for Mr. Incredible, amongst all the other things that the government and everyone else complains about, but it's a very complicated situation that I feel like most people would have to be very specially trained to deal with those situations. So it's kind of like, what would you have done? You know? I don't know. I mean, you probably would have tried to help them in any way you could, but now think about that, and then think about you trying to help someone as just a normal human, and then someone who has superpowers. You know, it's weird. It's an interesting situation. And also, there was like a train accident where a lot of those people who were on that train, which the tracks blew up because that bomber's bomb ended up on the tracks, and you will see if you watch the movie how that happened. But basically, Mr. Incredible had to try and resolve the train situation because there was no longer a track. And then all those people on the train, a lot of them at least, had some injuries, so they were also upset. But it's also like, he didn't really cause that situation, and what was he supposed to do? Just let them die? I don't know. It's complicated, and it's messy, you know? And I just think, I don't know what I would do in that situation. So, Okay, so when we get to the present, and Mr. Incredible is now working in insurance in this really small cubicle, and he's really like this tall, like muscular, bigger guy. He's clearly aged a little. He's talking to this older lady, and she's really sad, and eventually starts, sniffling, being upset because he's denying her claim that was supposed to help her. She's an older lady, and she even states that she's on a fixed income. She's not going to be able to afford whatever the situation is. We see that Bob helps her, but he doesn't do it and okay, I'm going to accept your claim. He just says, I can't technically do this for you, but then he gives her a notepad. He's like, but this is what you should do. And you can see that he doesn't like his job. I mean, if it's not just the customer complaints and all the stressors with that, it's that his boss is so abusive, verbally abusive, always making threats. He's mad that basically Bob isn't exploiting their customers, which, if we sit and talk about insurance and what a weird little scam insurance can be, I'm sure it's helped people, but I do feel like a lot of the time it's not really, it's always a what if, and it's good to have a backup for the what ifs something happens, but really it's just a way to take our money even more. We don't have other things to worry about. But anyway, basically you see that his boss is abusive and exploitative and wants Bob to also be exploitative and always think about saving the money and basically abusing their customers and lying to their customers so that the richer higher-ups can be happy and they can be more protected, which is super fucked up. And Bob's like a good guy, so he's always trying to be the hero in every situation that he's in, but he also seems like a pretty morally good, decent human being. And you see that like right away with the dynamics. And his boss is just, basically the manager or like the CEO that you would find in a lot of offices. So I'll leave it with that. And so you see him go home. He's clearly fed up, and it's like one of those situations where something happens and then it's just a domino effect because things keep getting worse. So he gets out of his car and he like slips on a skateboard because he lives in like a suburb. And he has like 3 kids at this point. So someone's toy or skateboard was there, and he slips on it and he grabs onto his car, and he like makes a dent in the car where the door is supposed to close. So he tries to close the door, and when he slams it because he gets irritated and he breaks the window. So of course that pisses him off. And so he lifts up the car, and like this cute little kid, probably one of their little neighbors, is on his little tricycle, and he has like gum all over his mouth because he sees this guy basically just lifting his vehicle. Because again, Bob is like a hero, but he has to pretend that he's not. This kid's just looking at him, and it's so cute, and such a small moment in the film that just adds a little bit of a kicker to it. I think it's adorable. And so he goes home, and we see at some point where Bob and Helen were talking on the phone when he was at work, and they have 3 kids. They have a baby named Jack, a daughter named Violet, who I believe is in high school, and Dash, who I believe is in middle school. Probably, yeah. Oh, maybe he's in elementary, actually, because I think he was in 4th grade going to 5th grade. So he is probably in elementary. Violet's probably either in late middle school or high school. And Jack's like a baby. He doesn't really talk yet either. And at this point, everyone in the family has powers except for Jack. At least that's what they think at first. And Helen seems to just be like a stay-at-home mom, and she's taking care of the house, taking care of the kids. They talk about how they had to move because something happened before. And it seems like the government gave most of the supers like a certain amount of money or aid after that transition with the law to help them start over. It's been years, but it seems like they still have like a connection that helped them move, maybe to get a job as well. And you see that in bits and pieces later as well. There's like an older guy. He looks like he might be like an agent of some sort for the government, and him and Bob are pretty close. But Bob just keeps making the same mistakes. Basically, he keeps exposing himself because he can't hold it in, and he clearly is unhappy in his job and his life for the most part. And he's not really present as a husband, and he doesn't seem to be very present as a father either. It's not that it doesn't seem like he cares about his family. It just seems like he's not giving them the attention that they need. And I think it's because most of his energy is drained and used at work and in that very toxic environment, and then he comes home and it doesn't actually leave him. It's still lingering, and he's not taking it out on his family in the way that he's being like terrible to them, but he's being distant from them. And you see that a lot in the beginning. And you can see that Helen's trying to make everyone happy. She's clearly a great wife, a great mother, a great woman. But you also see that she's given up and sacrificed just as much as Bob, because also she was a very well-known hero as well, just like Mr. Incredible. But, she's taken the role of being the mother and taking care of the house and cooking and doing that. And I don't imagine that would have been easy for her to transition into, even after they got married. And in the beginning, you see her talking about settling down. What's that, So, but then she gets married right away. So it's funny. I think it's funny. And yeah, I think that this is good because, and this is something I want to talk about, I think it's really annoying when adults are regretful of the life that they're currently living, and they like to blame it on their partners or their spouses, and they get like resentful because they can't balance or otherwise like realize that what they have going on in one place they should not take home, because that creates tension and anxiety for everyone around you in your household, and it's not fair to them. I also feel like, although it could happen with any gender, this happens a lot for men, where the woman will automatically have to take on this motherly role, even for her own husband, and he'll act like his world is ending, and he'll act like he's the only one like having to sacrifice. But it's fairly clear that Helen has also had to sacrifice, but she understands that she made a sacrifice when she got married and decided to have children, so she has new responsibilities that she has to grow with. Where Bob feels like, I have new responsibilities and it's not fair, but it's also like he also made the decision to get married and have children, so why isn't he able to grasp that in the same way that Helen is? Think about that. Okay. A little frustrated with that. And you can see that their marriage isn't doing well. They are, like I said before, distant. They're having small arguments that lead to bigger arguments later in the movie. They're not telling each other everything. They're not communicating. But you can tell that Helen really loves Bob. And like I said, I don't think Bob's a bad person, but I do think he has some growing up to do. And I think he's a bit selfish. And I feel like Helen is like awesome. I think she's really cool. But I also feel like she waited a while to be like, this is what I need from you, and you need to change. I feel like she gives him a lot of chances and lets him, like, she enables him sometimes and gives him a lot of excuses because she loves him and she knows it's hard on him. But like I said, there is points where she never like shies away from it. She's not docile. She's not a damsel by any means. But you can tell that when she does face him, it's after he's done so many things and she's just at her breaking point. And so yeah, it's interesting. The family dynamics, the marriage, how deep the film gets into that, and it doesn't leave any loose ends. It's very clear about what's going on with this family, and it's really realistic, I think. I like it a lot. Okay, and then we also get some perspectives with the children because Dash is struggling in school. He's getting in trouble. He's pulling pranks on his teacher. He gets into the principal's office a lot. You see Helen lecturing him about that, and he's mostly complaining because he feels like he really wants to do sports, but his parents won't let him because he is a super and he has powers and he's super fast, which is one of his very specific abilities. I think that's his only ability, but you know, that's his ability. And obviously in athletics, speed is like a great thing to have, and they don't want him getting cocky and they don't want him cheating, and I think that they're really good parents for that. But obviously Dash is a kid who wants to be just like everybody else. And you see him also talking to Ellen about how, well, basically he says, Dad says we are special and we shouldn't be ashamed of our powers, but you guys always want us to hide our powers, so what is it? And it's one of those things where parents are doing the best they can to try to help their kid, and sometimes the decisions that they make are actually for the best for their kid, but their kid's obviously making a really valid point, although they don't understand the complexities of the situation to the extent that the parents do, where Dash is like, well, you say I'm special and I shouldn't hide it, but every day I can't be myself. Interesting. Good question, Dash. Great question, actually. And then you see Violet. She's really shy. Her hair's always in her eye. She has a crush on this boy named Tony. She has the ability to create force fields and to completely disappear, or whatever parts of her body, her arm, her face, whatever she wants to disappear at the time, she can make it happen. You also see that Dash and Violet haven't had a lot of training with their powers. It could be because their parents really don't want them playing with their powers a lot because they could get in a lot of trouble. So you can see that they kind of know how to use their powers, but they're not really well versed in them yet, and you'll see them use them a lot more later. Yeah, so Violet's really cute. She's shy, and it's like a normal sibling thing. We have like a table scene where Violet and Dash start arguing because Dash is teasing her about her crush, and the mom's trying to figure out why she doesn't want to eat, and Jack's just being Jack, and they're having a normal family thing, and then they start fighting at the table and so on and so forth. And we see Lucius show up. I don't know why that's a tongue twister. AKA Frozone show up, and him and Bob basically have like this bowling night, but it's really so they can listen to police scanners so that they can go and like fight crime on the low, not get in trouble with their wives or the government. And I guess for the most part they've been doing okay, but this time things kind of go bad, and they are trying to like stop this guy who's trying to steal from this jewelry store, and they can't get out in time, and the cops show up, and ultimately Frozone like freezes the cop once he gets a drink of water, so on and so forth. So we see a little bit of them rebelling against the rules and also them lying, but also we see a little bit of their friendship. And we also see that this is kind of how Bob and Frozone can relive in their glory days beyond just like fantasy and daydreaming. They're actually doing some small things that they did in the past. And we also see that someone is watching them, a woman specifically, and we find out later that her name is Mirage. I think that's her name. Apologize if I mispronounced that, but that's really kind of cool. She kind of looks like a spy, and they don't really notice that she's there. Okay, so at some point, Bob gets into another argument with his employer, his boss, but he pushes him too far, and basically Bob sees that someone's being like threatened outside, and probably it looks like it's like a thief who stole something from that person, the victim, and looks like they're like getting beat up, and Bob's like, oh, someone needs help, and his boss says, oh, let's hope they don't like make a claim, or let's hope they don't need our help. So he clearly doesn't care, and he's making jokes about someone's like life, which isn't funny at all, and Bob's really bothered by it. And so Bob is about to go out and try to help him. Again, Bob wants to be everybody's superhero all the time. He means well, but still, you can't save everyone, right? But obviously he sees someone needs help, so he's going to try to help, and the boss is just like fighting him about it, basically threatens him when he's about to leave and says, if you leave, you're going to be fired in one way or another. I'm paraphrasing. And you can see Bob being angry. His fists are clenched, the doorknob is squished from his strength, and he turns around and ultimately like grabs his boss by the neck and like throws him through like several walls and really fucks him up. And then we cut to a scene with Bob kind of realizing, oh shit, I really messed up and exposed myself. So clearly he lost his job, obviously, and they're at the hospital, and that's when that agent guy shows up. Clearly they have, Bob and that agent have some history and he's kind of fed up with Bob and saying, this happens again, we already got you moved, we can't keep doing this is it, you're fine, like this isn't going to go on your record or anything, but yeah, you're on your own at this point. Then he stops the elevator when he's about to leave, and he says to Bob, well, actually, if you need our help one more time, I can probably pull some strings. So clearly there's some sort of bond between them where they really care about each other, or for some reason, you know. But yeah, so that happens, and Bob doesn't tell Helen that he got fired or anything that goes on. Instead, he tells Helen that he got a promotion. And he also finds out that someone wants to give him like an offer to be a superhero. He'll get paid like triple or double the salary that he was making before. They also know details about him listening to police scanners, so clearly they've been knowing. He kind of jumps at the idea for, I think, several reasons, but one being he needs a job because he just got fired and he doesn't want Helen to know. And two, he is dying to be able to do superhero work again, and he doesn't really bother to do a lot of research at first. He's just kind of like, yeah, I have nothing to lose. This is exactly what I want. Sure. So, yeah, he tells Helen he's doing a promotion. He lies to her, so on and so forth. And jump to Bob basically meeting this lady who's the one who left him a message named Mirage, who works for this higher-up rich guy who doesn't want anyone to know his identity. And she basically puts him through a lot of different tests and tells him like bits and pieces of what the program is, but not really telling him really what it is. And he sometimes I think he knows he's being tested by them, and other times I think he just thinks he's actually doing some secret mission somewhere, and he doesn't realize that everything that's there is really set up in like electronic, and they've really set it up a very specific way. And he's constantly traveling, and Helen's really happy for Bob because she thinks he's got a promotion, he's doing well, and he's happy, and they're normal, and that's just not the case. And so Helen starts to pick up a few signs. So like he's on the phone late, and she hears like a lady's voice. He's traveling a lot. He's being kind of standoffish about certain things when she asks. But you also see a moment, like a montage of him being super happy and working out all the time, them being really more in love again and like super kissy and flirty. So clearly this has uplifted his spirits a lot, and he's happier, and so Helen's also happy too. But then she starts to figure out that something's up, and she probably suspects cheating, which I would too. So and when you think about it, it is a little suggestive, because sometimes him and that lady Mirage are just a little too close. They're just a little too close to each other. I'm just saying. Okay, maybe no one else noticed. I feel like it was little too touchy-feely sometimes. But so he does have a few sequences with Edna Mode. Edna, who's like this famous designer, super rich, who did a lot of like fashion for the supers. I don't know if she does other stuff, I'm sure she does. And he comes because he wants to get his suit fixed because he's doing a lot more physical activity, and he doesn't want Edna to necessarily know. He just comes there for a patch job, but Edna's really like, no, I actually have an idea, and I have an idea for your family. So they have history too, and Edna's so funny and straight to the point and sassy, and I don't know how you could just like not like Edna. She has these little big circle glasses and this like bangs with bobs. She's so small, but she's so mighty in personality. Love her. And so she gets him a suit, and they talk without really talking, right? So they're kind of like talking in code, where Edna's like, oh, this suit's pretty worn out for how long it's been. And he's like, yeah, well, it's just for memories, like clearly it's not just for memories, but they're talking in circles, but they're getting to the point basically to fix his suit. So later she agrees to fix the suit, but really she still tells him, I'm gonna make you a new suit, but I'll fix the suit. And they have a whole argument about capes. Because Edna says capes are dangerous. Too many superheroes died because of capes. And I think this is so cool to think, like, again, this movie does a good job of like merging the normalcy with the super, and like the bad things that could happen from superheroes. And I think they're the first to really delve into that. Well, from what I've seen, I was never really into comics in terms of like reading them, so maybe the comics have done that in the past, I wouldn't know. But just in terms of being on screen during that time, you always see like superheroes and you see all the damage they do, but you never really see like the after effect. It's just like everyone's alive, yay, he does it again. But it really delves into like the problems, and so the weird like cape thing kind of makes so much sense. Like when you think about how your key strap will get stuck to something, or your jacket will get caught in a door. It makes so much sense to kind of piece that together with capes, because it's sort of this, it's obviously hiding their identity, but it's also giving them a distinctive image, but it's very performative to have this sort of costume. And it's like, you kind of want something that's more realistic with all the danger that you're gonna go through, and you see like them smiling and them being super and their powers, and it's so cool, but they really deal with like really stressful stuff. And it also protects their identity from like the villains, but also gives them privacy, so on and so forth. So interesting. I liked that. It was like comical, but it wasn't. It was like dark humor. So yeah, they fight about that. Ultimately, Edna says no capes, and that's just what it is. Edna gets what Edna wants. Bob gets to the point where he's kind of asking Mirage what's going on, like who's the boss. I do make it a habit to know who I'm working for, and she kind of runs in circles about that. He has another mission coming up, and one way or another he does go on that mission, but as soon as he gets there, basically, like he gets attacked by this machine, but it's like a new and improved machine, and he meets this his boss basically, and he goes by the name Syndrome, and Syndrome happens to be the kid that he blew off when he was younger. And so this guy's basically doing all this stuff to get revenge on supers, but specifically Mr. Incredible, and they were clearly looking for him. So Syndrome is that kid who was really smart and had like those flying shoes. He basically sells weapons to people, which is why he's incredibly rich and has so much access, power, and technology. And in one way or another, he talks about how no one listened to me when I wasn't a threat, and now I'm a threat, so now you feel sorry, blah, 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 which is kind of true with how the world is. Like, people don't really care about you unless they feel like you can give them something, or you can make something easier for them, or they can use you. But he's kind of like the villain. It's like his villain origin story, and I feel like this happens a lot with a lot of just like everyday people, where they take one very specific instance that happens to them in childhood, like let's say you get rejected by your crush, and then they take that on for the rest of their life. And on one hand, I feel like it makes sense if you were younger or it was your first time getting rejected to really hold on to that memory, because it probably didn't feel very good. But to never grow and like reassess and reflect and just learn from it, and instead to just sit and let that hatred simmer, is so childish. I feel like a lot of people do that. They'll take one instance and be like, oh, I'm never going to be with this type of person because when I was in kindergarten. And that isn't to say things like if you like got hurt or something in kindergarten or something, that's like trauma, but it's those very specific things that aren't like as serious, where people just like won't ever let it go. Like, not even a little bit. It's so weird to me. But anyway, that's why he became a villain, and basically he reveals himself, and he talks about how basically he's killed off tons of other supers that he's recruited so he could test his technology on real people and collect more power. And he has this whole plan to like become a super, but he doesn't have any real powers, he just has technology. But he also doesn't plan on fighting real villains because there's a risk for him actually getting hurt. The guy's a narcissist basically, and so he's creating his own villains that he controls to make himself look like the good guy. It was genius in its own right, but it's also super scary and creepy. Anyway, he tries to kill Mr. Incredible. He thinks he kills Mr. Incredible, but when he falls into like this cave underwater, and he ends up behind like the bones of some other super or something that got stuck down there. And then when Syndrome's like scanner scans over it to see if Mr. Incredible's dead, it says he's dead because it scanned bones and not Mr. Incredible. So, yeah. So, he thinks that Mr. Incredible is dead. And then this whole time, Helen's basically finding out that everything her husband has been telling her is a lie, and she basically has been noticing signs of things being off. But when she sees that his old outfit, Mr. Incredible outfit, is stitched up, she knows Edna knows something, so she goes and talks to Edna. Edna loves Elastigirl because she can see how excited she is when she's called by Helen. And then when Helen goes there, basically Helen opens up to Edna and is like, oh, I have all these suits, whole family. And she says, yeah, Bob was here, but she doesn't really give that many details. And then Helen sort of has like a breakdown because clearly Edna's like knows everyone's business, but also knows them really well. And so Helen just feels like she can open up to her to some extent, and she's really sad and overwhelmed because she doesn't know what her husband's doing, but she suspects he might be cheating or suspects that he's lying to her, and she's really hurt by that, and she feels really alone and sad and doesn't know what to do, and feels like she can't get him to just get over the past. And Edna first gives her like tissues, like, okay, yeah, let her cry, and then after a minute she's like, oh my god, get yourself together. It's so good. God, pull yourself together. And then she's like, you need to remind him who he is, and you need to remind him who you are. Basically telling her, like, you are that bitch. What are you doing? Leave it to Edna. And basically she has like this little tracking device that can show where Bob is because it's connected to his suit, and so that's how they know that he was lying. And she also knows where he isn't where he said he would be. So after all that, Helen decides she's gonna go find him, and she packs up the suits that Edna gave her, and she's gonna go there and bring him home and figure out what's going on. At this point, he's in danger, but Syndrome thinks he's dead somehow, and this is basically happening all at once, but they're in different places. So Helen's doing all that, has talked to Edna, so on and so forth. And Bob is back wherever this like solo island is that Syndrome owns, and Syndrome thought he was dead, so on and so forth. But he gets in the building again somehow, and he gets into like one of these rooms. It kind of looks like something out of X-Men. It looks like Dr. X's, or I think it's Dr. X. I think it looks like his little room that he like rolls into, and he puts like his little helmet on, and he can see everything. It feels like that vibe. And there's like a big screen in there, and basically Mr. Incredible goes in there and he sees like digital file list of all these supers who have been terminated, the ones that Syndrome is tracking. He even sees himself in there as terminated, so he knows that they think he's dead. And he sees his wife and other things, and it says like unknown or known, but they haven't actually done anything yet. I think it's known for Frozone because they saw Frozone with him at one point, and so he clearly notices that his family is going to be at risk very soon. And when he tries to leave, his suit beeps, because obviously that's at the time where Edna and Helen are trying to figure out where he is, and they figure it out, but his suit beeps because they're tracking him. But he obviously didn't know that was on there. Edna, isn't she sneaky? And so that happens, and he gets caught again, and he gets put on these little, they're kind of like electrical shackles, and that happens. And then Helen is packing, and she's taking the suits. She basically tells Violet that she's in charge until she gets back. And the kids are kind of like, what is going on? And Dash runs in there and sees the suits, and he grabs one of his suits out, and he's like, oh, there's a suit. And he's like, oh, there's one for Violet too. And Violet's like, Mom, what's going on? And she's trying to avoid it at all costs, but they're just not falling for it. And eventually she gets access to like a jet or some sort of plane, and with her connections from the past, I'm sure. And she gets on it, and she thinks she's ready to go, but then she sees Violet and she sees Dash because they stowed away on the jet and or plane. And she asks like, where's Jack Jack? And then you see Jack Jack with a nanny, this like super talkative, uppity nanny, and that's funny a little later. And yeah, and of course things go haywire there because I guess Helen kind of calls in and she's like, we're gonna need to land or whatever, and Syndrome sees it as a threat, and he's like, I don't know who you called, but they're on the way here, and basically we're gonna like shoot them down, so whatever. And when Mr. Incredible hears that it's Helen's voice, he's like freaking out. He's like, that's my, like, he doesn't say it, but in his head he's probably thinking, oh, that's my wife. And he's obviously worried, and Syndrome sends like his jets. She's trying to yell like, disengage, disengage, and she's like, there are children aboard, trying to get them to like cease fire basically, and that doesn't happen. Syndrome's like adamant that they're gonna shoot it down, and Mirage is in there the whole time, and she's looking around like, oh my god, I didn't know there were children. But it's also like, okay girl, you're okay with killing that lady, would you change your mind when there are children? How about we just like don't kill people? Whatever. Mirage is like this character that's constantly like going back and forth. Was like, I want to do the right thing, but I also work here and have to do this. And she's also like, I feel like she's put in there as like a form of temptation, which is like a whole other argument that I could get into, but I don't think I should get into that today. But yeah, and then you can see Mr. Incredible just like freak out because he knows like what other children would be with Helen besides their kids. So obviously he's scared. And the jet gets hit because obviously they don't cease fire like Helen hopes they will, and she grabs both her kids. You can tell she loves her kids so much. She's so cool. She grabs her kids and she like becomes a little parachute for them. But there was a real threat there. Like, they could have died, and I think that they're realizing it more. And sadly, they didn't get to like slowly ease into this. They're just seeing like how bad it can be to be a super. And even Helen talks about how, you know, these aren't just like the cartoons you saw on Saturdays. This is real, and if they can kill you, they will. You know, that's the difference. And it's really putting the family to the test, not only with like secrets and lies and threats to their family in really physical, violent ways, but also forcing them to push themselves. I mean, even in the jet before it gets shot down, and while Helen's trying to ask them to cease fire, basically, she's yelling at Violet to try to put up a force field, but obviously Violet doesn't have a lot of experience. Her mom is scaring her and stressing her out, and she's not able to do that at that point. Either way, they all live and they fall into the water, and they end up finding a cave, and Helen's like, you need to stay here. And on the other end, Mr. Incredible is crushed because he thinks his family's dead, and he's really mad. He threatens Syndrome, like he tries to grab him, but he ends up grabbing Mirage, and he's like, what are you gonna do about it? Basically saying, like, I don't care. He can kill her for all I care. And also, I don't think he thinks that Mr. Incredible will do it, but she gets mad at Syndrome later and also starts to see his true colors, which I don't know how she didn't see them before, but whatever. And she basically like tells him, like, next time you wanna, you know, make a bargain, don't involve my life. Thank you very much. And I think that was the minute where she decided to help Mr. Incredible, because she does try to help him get away. But before she can actually do that, Helen shows up, and he's just so glad to see that she's alive, but she's really mad. She even tells him to like let go of her because she's so pissed, and she thinks he was cheating, and she doesn't know why he was lying and all these things. And then you also see Dash and Violet basically fighting off all these men that are employed by Syndrome, and they have guns, and they're literally straight up shooting at these kids. And Dash is running around, you know, throwing punches. He's running on water, having the time of his life at some point. He's just really living in this. And Violet's really adjusting to her force fields a little more, and she's obviously going invisible, and they do get hit. They do get, there's like a threat on their lives, but they do also have a lot of wins in those fights, and a lot of that is because they help each other, so that's good. And then Mr. Incredible and Helen are basically bickering and fighting. You can tell that they're both happy that they're together and that they're both okay to some extent. And Mr. Incredible is just happy to know that they're alive, basically, so he doesn't even care that she's mad. And they kind of slightly talk about what's going on, but don't. And I think Miss Helen like punches out Mirage when she gets in there. So that's funny. But yeah, so while that's happening, and he even says like, why'd you bring the kids? She's like, I didn't bring the kids, they stowed away. They all meet back up in the forest, and they're all happy to see each other. And you know, Jack's at home, of course, he's not there, but they do get caught. Syndrome like uses his little skills to freeze them, which aren't really skills, it's just this technology that's built into whatever he has on like his arms. And he's like, oh, it's a whole family of supers. Oh my god, you married Elastigirl? Blah, 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 blah. And, you know, the commentary is cool, but he has them all now on the electrical shackles, chains, whatever he wants to call those. And they get out because of Violet. Everyone leaves except they're chained up, and Violet is able to like float out of it and release their little like ball shackle things. And they escape yet again, and they have to go and try to fight Syndrome in the city because, like I said before, he's gonna pretend that like, oh, this big giant robot ball thing that I've invented and executed perfectly is gonna attack the city, and I get to pretend to be the superhero, so on and so forth. So they're trying to get there, and they do get there, but not without difficulty, because they have to sneak out and they have to find some sort of jet or something to get there, and they make sort of like a makeshift jet. But basically Helen is like stretched to the max. She's called Elastigirl, but she's holding together this giant like top part of a jet, but they're inside this little trailer sort of truck. Whatever, you know, they had to do what they could to get there. And Bob's like at the front kind of steering it, and the kids are like, are we there yet? It's like all these crazy family dynamics going on while they're trying to like fight crime.
How you doing, honey? Do I have to answer?
And basically they get to the city, they're fighting crime. We cut to Frozone seeing stuff outside and him yelling at Honey, his wife, saying, oh, the people need me, the public's in danger, and my evening's in danger. And because he can't find his suit. Ugh, it's a classic. And they're in the streets of the city, and Frozone's fighting, and Dash is fighting, and Violet's fighting, and Helen's fighting, and Bob's fighting, and they're getting their hits, you know, but ultimately they saved a day, and they have a pretty good response from the public and commentary like, oh yeah, that's old school from like these older guys, civilians. And it kind of lightens up the idea of supers coming back, and people are kind of happy about it. And then, you know, they're all happy, they're fighting as a family, they can kind of be themselves again. So after that they go home, and Helen and everybody is relaxed and so happy, and Dash is like, oh, my family's so cool. And again, I'm not getting into the action sequences because I feel like they kind of speak for themselves, and it's sort of something where you can explain it as well as you want, but it's one of those things where you just need to see it to really understand what's going on, and really get the full effect of it. But when they're in the car, Helen is listening to like these messages that were left by the babysitter, and clearly she's freaking out, and we find out that basically Jack's powers have started to happen, and the babysitter is like, something's really wrong with your child, and she's freaking out on the phone. And by the end of like the last message, she says, oh, thanks for calling in the replacement, I really appreciate it, bye. Basically in one way or another, paraphrasing there. And Helen's kind of like, we didn't call for a replacement. And then they run in the house. Like I said, the pacing is really good and can be pretty quick sometimes, but it doesn't feel rushed. And basically Syndrome has somehow made his way to the child. He's like, oh, I'll make him a sidekick. Obviously they're scared out of their minds. Their baby's getting taken away, basically kidnapped. They can't do anything because he's like frozen them with whatever electricity he has. But as he tries to get away, Jack like turns on his powers, and you get just a little peek of what he has. Basically you find out he's like a jack of all trades in just a matter of seconds. And I remember this being like the coolest thing ever when I was a kid. Like, oh my god, Jack has powers and they're so cool, but also being sad because like you don't really get to see the full effect of them. And it's coming from this little tiny little cute baby. And I loved that. It was like a perfect little taste, but also a cliffhanger. And obviously Helen gets Jack, like Bob throws Helen up and they catch Jack when he falls from Syndrome's arms. Syndrome threatens them, basically saying, I'll get the kid some other way later. Basically he just cannot get a grip on reality. Basically his cape like snags and pulls him to his death, and like there's a bomb because Mr. Incredible throws the car at whatever airplane or whatever he was going into, and it causes like an explosion, and I think his cape gets snagged. Two things happen at once. It's kind of blurry in my head. But yeah, and they're like a little happy family now, and they don't have to hide as much, and they all have a little more confidence, and they're stronger than before. And we see them at a track meet. Dash is running, and the family is like telling him to get second place, just do second place. People are looking at them like, well, what is wrong with them? Violet's really confident, her hair's like pulled out of her face, she's really taking charge. You see that they're kind of opening up to supers again. And then after the track meet in the parking lot, you see this, you know, villain coming into the picture right at the last second. They all look around at each other, and then there's a cut to them with their mask on, and then it plays that incredible song again, and the movie is over. And I just want to say, that cliffhanger left me on edge for years as a kid, because it's literally leading up to, you know, them fighting crime again as a family, but a lot more prepared. and experienced now to some extent. And then it was just like that for what, 14 years? I remember as a kid just being like, are they gonna make a new one? Are they gonna make a new one? And eventually they did, obviously, because they did Incredibles 2, but it took forever. And I will say I'm probably not going to do a commentary over the second one, but that's not because it's not good. I think that the second one is so good. I love that they started off right where the last one ended. I love that they didn't do like a fast forward, because I think I always wanted to see where that would have ended up. And the second one is just as good. Obviously the first one's better because it's the first one, but I think it makes so much sense that Helen ends up taking on, you know, the role this time, and all the things that come with that really actually makes so much sense in terms of plot for the next movie. They did such an incredible job with both movies, but I definitely love The Incredibles, the first one, a lot more. And I think that's really natural. The first ones are always usually the better ones, but the second one definitely lived up to what I needed it to, even though it was like 14 years later, maybe more. And a very nostalgic experience. I'm sure there are a lot of adults in the theaters for Incredibles 2. Yeah, so I'm gonna do my last little segment with the quotes. So, one quote that I really liked, it's between Helen, Violet, and a little bit of Dash. Helen: now it's perfectly normal. Violet: normal? What do you know about normal? What does anyone in this family know about normal? Helen: now wait a minute, young lady. Violet: we act normal, Mom. I want to be normal. The only normal one is Jack Jack, and he's not even toilet trained. And then you hear Jack Jack laughing, and then Dash says, lucky. Okay, this scene is between Mr. Incredible and Syndrome. Mr. Incredible: you mean you killed off real heroes so you could pretend to be one? Syndrome: oh, I'm real. Real enough to defeat you, and I did it without your precious gifts, your oh so special powers. I'll give them heroics. I'll give them the most spectacular heroics anyone's ever seen. And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my invention so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be. Okay, this scene is between Elastigirl and Violet. Elastigirl: put these on. Your identity is your most valuable possession. Protect it. And if anything goes wrong, use your powers. Violet: but you said to never use. Elastigirl: I know what I said. Elastigirl: remember the bad guys on the shows you used to watch on Saturday mornings? Well, these guys aren't like those guys. They won't exercise restraint because you are children. They will kill you if they get the chance. Do not give them that chance. This is between Violet, and she's talking to Dash. Violet: Mom and Dad's lives could be in jeopardy, or worse, their marriage. This is between Bob and Edna. Bob: you know I'm retired from hero work. Edna: as am I, Robert, yet here we are. And that's the end of that segment. Thank you all for listening. Just wanted to thank everyone who's been listening for the past 2.5 years. July would have made roughly 2.5 years of me doing commentaries, and I appreciate all the support, and I hope that I continue to grow and that you continue to grow with me. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye.
Girls, come on. Leave the saving of the world to the men? I don't think so. I don't think so.